Yeah, just wait for. So we are going live in 3, 2, 1.
A very good afternoon, all, and thank you for joining us this Wednesday afternoon. We take this opportunity to welcome you to the first inaugural webinar of the By Design series, brought to you jointly by TiE and QGLUE. By Design is a design-driven entrepreneurship masterclass series specially curated for founders, entrepreneurs, and business leaders who are constantly looking for new approaches, tools, and case studies to create business success. This 6-session webinar series brings you leading global experts to boost your knowledge in applying design-driven methodologies, processes, and strategies to maximize business gains. This series also leads to IDEA's 2021 Awards on April 16th, which is a flagship initiative to inform, inspire, and empower design and innovation-driven entrepreneurship. These awards aim to empower startups maximize their success and impact. Do apply for the awards today at the link provided at the end of the session. We request you to type in your questions in the Q&A box or the chat box, and Dr. Rui would respond to it either during the session or after it. Today's webinar is on co-design approaches for startups by Dr. Rui Patricio. This session provides insights on how collaborative innovation practices between startups and organizations creates breakthrough value. Rui Patricio holds a PhD degree in marketing and strategy from the University of Aveiro. He is currently the coordinator of the Strategic Design and Innovation Lab and an assistant professor at IADE Lisbon. His research interests lie at the intersection between innovation management, gamification, and design thinking. He's carried out applied research on design approaches to innovation in global firms, which has resulted in publications in journals like Creativity and Innovation Management and the European Journal of Innovation Management. He is also the creator of gamification tools for innovation, such as IdeaChef, which has been applied by many firms and universities. And before moving to the academic community, he's held various management roles in marketing and innovation at startups and leading organizations. I now invite Dr. Roy to commence his session. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Lina, for the introduction. Thank you so much for the organization to inviting me. And it's really a great pleasure to be here. It's my first time having such a great audience from India. And I would really love to interact and to engage with you throughout the presentation and eventually leaving more time for the Q&A at the end. So I'll move forward, and I'm kicking off this series of 6 webinars, and the title is Creating Value by Design, which is something that I really try to show exactly how my presentation will fit into this topic. And I thought it was really appropriate to start by sharing exactly the process of co-designing for startups, and that's precisely the title of my presentation. And before that, I would like just to give you some words about myself besides the excellent introduction that Lina did. I would like also to highlight the fact that I'm coordinating a strategic and design innovation lab in Lisbon that is a partnership with Politécnico de Milan, the design school, one of the top schools in the world in design. And I had the great pleasure to work there, to teach, and to collaborate in several projects. And I'm still having a very close partnership with Italy. So I'm doing projects in Milan and Lisbon, always back and forth. So that's something that is really interesting for the point of view of developing new approaches for design and innovation. And that's the reason why we decided to open this new lab in Lisbon to strengthen and to develop the collaboration between my school, that's the Faculty of Design, Technology and Communication of Universidade Europeia in Lisbon, and the Design School of Politécnico de Milan. But eventually, what you probably don't know about me is like, I would like just to highlight three things that I mean, just to show a bit more about my interests. And at the introduction, Lina was talking about the gamification process that I designed, the method and tool, Idea Chef. Now I'm in a process of designing a new gamified method to support ideation. This time it's going to be completely, entirely online. And again, I'm having the support with the Polyme, so it's like still strengthening ties and developing things together. And I hope very soon it will be possible to announce and to explain how it's going to work and the value that we can create to organizations. And obviously, because eventually it's an author that you may know, I'm reading a very interesting book, and I really love literature, and I also like music. So it's like, I mean, just three things that at least make this introduction to what about I really like. And besides my work, that I'm really always in love with things that I'm doing. And that's the reason why I really wanted to have this opportunity to share the knowledge and the lessons that I've learned throughout the time that I was involved in a project related to co-creation, and that I thought that it had like a very close fit with the topic of this webinar series, particularly this creating value by design. And so the agenda for the presentation is going to be like a very short introduction about the two concepts that are really core for understanding the case, because it's a practical case that I'm going to deliver to you to understand the impact it could have in companies and particularly in startups. So these two concepts will be introduced shortly, gamification and co-creation and how they work together. And then I will go through the case study that will be like the core of the presentation, because I will go deeper in terms of explaining the project, the method that we took to achieve the results, and also about this specific case of a company. And the case was particularly in this area of furniture. And so we will have time to discuss and to clarify the process with this practical example. And then we will end up with some conclusions, and I hope it will be like the takeaway for you, particularly for the startups that are attending this webinar, that can be also interesting for them to apply in their work process and the way they interact and engage with the clients, which is something that could be evaluated from this presentation. And so that's basically the agenda. And so let's move to the concepts. And obviously that when I was really challenged to deliver a presentation, I thought that I should have something that could be very much in line with the main topic. And the main topic was creating value by design. So, I mean, co-creation as this kind of fit that I strongly believe that is evaluated for the audience, because co-creation is basically, I don't want to go into detail about theoretical definitions, because you may have the chance then to read the papers and the literature, but it's basically the practice of developing in a collaborative process, in participative process, meaningful solutions. I mean, it could be either products or services or a full system, a PPS, that can have interaction and interchange of ideas between multiple actors. When we talk about multiple actors, we talk about typically the stakeholders that are critical for the creation of the solution. It could be obviously the customer and the supplier, eventually some partners. In this particular case, we will have the designers, and everything is going to be delivered in a very creative environment. And so this can be like the main building blocks of the co-creation definition, which is very much in line with the creation of value by design. But I'm talking about two different concepts. One is co-creation and the other is co-design. So I would like just to make sure that everyone understands the difference between the two. And obviously there is a lot of things in common about co-creation and co-design. I will say that we will have some influence from the designers when they intermediate the process of discussing things between the supplier and the customer, and the customer is the user. So the other characteristic of this concept is because of design, is user-centered. So in fact, the customer plays a key role in the development of the solution. So instead of having typically the supplier creating something for the client, in this case, the client is part of the creation of the solution, and it is playing really a key role, and we will see in detail how it works. So this, I think these two different factors can really explain why we are calling it co-design, and you'll see by the dynamic that was created during the project that the influence of the designers was really critical. And the other concept that is important for you to understand is gamification. I believe now gamification is like a buzzword, you know. You have gamification all over. You have gamification in schools, at universities. Learning is a well-known application. It's like the killing application for gamification. But there are many other processes that are being gamified. I mean, I can say that all type of interaction between customers and suppliers in a B2B market, B2C, there are so many areas that we can apply gamification, which is basically a process of making an activity more game-like in non-game context. It means like you are still working in the work process, so you are not disconnected from the work, but you insert, you add some game elements to your work process. And the goal is basically to encourage users' motivation and engagement, particularly when dealing with complex tasks. And the reason why I'm specialized in gamification of innovation is because innovation is a very complex process, you know, and particularly when you have to engage people throughout the innovation process that start at the early stage where it's very fuzzy, very complex, and go through the funnel and try to get to the market with a very good solution. So it involves a lot of people, diverse teams throughout the time that sometimes is very extended. It can take like months, years. And so we need to have people always engaged in the process. And so that's why we understood, I and many other researchers and practitioners that are applying gamification to innovation, that is a very powerful approach for innovation, and particularly in this case, for the co-creation. And it's also important to mention that there are some principles that we must apply every time that we would like to have a more successful gamification experience. And because gamification is not just a matter of applying points and explicit rewards to people, we need to apply not just the design principles that we all know, but all the psychological and behavior theories that really complement this. And why? This is simple, because we rely fundamentally in what we call like intrinsic motivation. It's not just a matter of getting rewards, a prize or a point, You need to have the motivation, intrinsic motivation to perform the task when you need to be engaged throughout the time and working with the others in order to achieve an objective. So this is why it's so important to apply these fundamentals. And there are some misunderstandings when we're talking about gamification, because people are saying, okay, gamification is like games or is like serious games. I mean, there are a lot of differences. I don't want to go into too much detail today because this is not really the topic. I will say that just in relation to serious games, they have in common, obviously, a clear set of rules, explicit rules for running a process, for going through the time of the process and doing a lot of activities. But I will say that gamification differs from serious games because you are not really completely immersed in a game as serious game. Imagining that you use like a flight simulator or something that can be interesting for you to develop some capabilities. Gamification, besides the process, has also the power to get something at the end as the output, because you are still working in the process. And this is particularly important in innovation and co-creation because you are not really disconnected from the process. You are working with game elements and these mechanics and dynamics that we create on top of the process to get better results. And so that's why, I mean, I hope that you are understanding this much better now, that we have a very powerful combination of getting into what is like the process of co-creation with gamification, because it will have more power in terms of create a more engaging approach for developing this type of solutions. And that's the example that we are going to have in the next case study, and the slides and everything that will go now is basically to show you how we did it, how we apply gamification to gamification for design and innovation to this co-creation case study. And to give you some background about the case, it was a process because I was explaining you that I did a lot of work in Milan with our partners from Polimi, and in fact this project was conducted in Milan. It was a project funded by the European Commission, and it was conducted during the Milan Design Week. I don't know if some of you have been there once. I mean, Milan Design Week is a well-known event all over the world because, I mean, in April every year, a lot of people are traveling to Milan to attend exhibitions and conferences and workshops. And this is like an event that is well known by innovation and design. And the core is still the furniture, because in Milan you have two major events. That is the fashion, the design fashion, and then you have the design week in April, which started as an event for the furniture industry that is so powerful in Italy, but then expanded to everything that has to do with innovation, creativity. And so it was the perfect place and environment to run this kind of project. And also because in this specific case, the company that we supported is also from this cluster. And so the project was intended to support what we call like, is a typical Italian word for the cross-fertilization of the process between typical, I mean, traditional industries, manufacturing industries, in this case, furniture, and what we call the creative industries. So design studios and typically startups that are trying to engage and they are in search for business in these relationships that are established with more traditional companies. So we wanted to close the gap between the two and helping them to connect and also to create more business. And so we applied this co-design and creative methods to make this connection work. So we apply the gamification and for co-creation method because we realized there was some shortcomings in terms of limitations about the existing methods, basically in terms of lack of structure and some need for engagement that I was explaining previously. So we really wanted to create something that could be like a new approach for companies that can be applied in these B2B conversations. And so we designed the process, a two-step process, that it started by what we call like the B2B speed date meetings. And that was supported by a co-creation toolkit that I'm not going to describe in detail, but eventually I may give you some other papers for you to read if you would like. And also the data collected from the interviews that were conducted with the main actors, people that were connecting together in this B2B meeting. There were like manufacturing companies, traditional ones from these sectors that are very active, still very active, these main clusters of industry, and the creative startups from some of the creative sectors that, I mean, were really eager to have more business with more traditional sectors, and that sometimes they were not really in the same page. There were difficulties in terms of communication, of connections. So we really wanted to help them to go through this process more successfully. And so everything started in a more traditional way when you express your needs. I mean, so basically the clusters started to deliver some briefings while they explicit some business needs to startups. However, I mean, it was up to the startups to interpret and to understand what was behind the briefing, you know, what was really the need, what was really the problem. And that's the language of design, or reframing the problem to understand clearly what type of value we can deliver to them. You know? So this was a process, mostly a traditional process where people were connecting, they were discussing with the support of this toolkit. And then the second step was to organize some co-design sessions in order to develop the solutions that were emerging from the conversations that people were having in these B2B sessions. And we decided to apply Idea Chef. That was the tool that I designed for developing ideas, and that I designed with support of Polyme. So we thought maybe we have this tool, and it may be interesting to apply this in these co-creation workshops, given the difficulties that we identify in the traditional tool set. And so I would like just to, in a nutshell, just to give you some highlights about what Idea Chef is. And eventually, if you'll have time, at the end, I can show you some short videos about people playing and using the tool. But this is basically a product. It's like a board game that was created basically to motivate and to involve people and to engage people throughout the process, typically the early stage of innovation. And the main goal was to create something at the end that end up with a solution, a more tangible one. And that's we try to do all the time. Is like we call it like converting something that is like an idea into an actionable recipe. And that's the metaphor, because Idea Chef was created when we were having an exhibition, world exhibition in Milan about food and cuisine, and we thought it was like a very good metaphor, and in fact it worked very well. And this type of process where a small team is engaged in a game-like, process, but supporting the innovation task, people are working together, are playing in a team of 4 up to 6, and so they can play. We say they play an idea, and this idea can be played multiple times, and eventually people can also play the idea with other teams, with other players. So it's a more sophisticated approach for developing a tool with the knowledge that is gathered by the different team members. And this method has been applied for 5 years, so this is in a mature stage. And this is something, I mean, is not really marketable, because I do not have a sales team, and I by myself and with my partners, because I have some other scholars and that are using this in other universities. But it's something that it is moving fast and having a lot of supporters from all over the world, and particularly in these 3 countries that we have more people using. And besides that, obviously, because I'm in academia, I try also to publish the results in scientific outlets in order to allow others to build on top of the knowledge that we are creating. And that's the reason also, because I'm also now trying to come up with a new tool. In this case, it's going to be an online tool. Maybe I can share this more detail at the end. And so, okay, and let's talk about now about the specific case. So that was like the process, and now I will go into detail about the specific case of one of the clusters. It was like a traditional manufacturing company from the furniture industry, and the goal of this particular company was to create a new product line that could really complement what they are doing as the outdoor flooring products. That's typically what you see in the image. And besides all the typical indoor flooring lines that they have with a combination of furniture and many other products, they were now moving to this more outdoor flooring area. So it was really a business need that has been identified during the B2B meeting. And they submitted like the briefing, and there was like a creative study that was very interested in making like a proposal, and they started engaging in these conversations with the company, with the manufacturing company. So they end up with the process, and in this process of co-designing the solution. So they started with the initial idea, and then they had the involvement of the whole team in this co-designing process that included it was not just a relationship between the client and the potential supplier, but also with intermediation of the designers. And that's why, I mean, I explained this initially, and I was stressing the differences between co-design and co-creation. In this case, designers, they played a very interesting role. And because we were in Milan, we are at university, we tried to move this conversation into a more neutral scenario that was neither the customer premises or the studio of the startup, but the university. So we invited them to come and to discuss this in this first step during the B2B meetings. And then the client and the startup, with intermediation of designers, they further developed the initial concept, having a more structured and timely manner discussion about several topics that were important for this co-creation. But what also complements the process of discussing is the pitching, is like the way that you can reflect the end result of this conversation with something that can lead you to the next stage. You know, if you want to prototype something, you need to have like a very clear view about what the solution should be. So in a very short time, we managed to get at the end a visual report of the proposed solution. It was not the initial concept that has been discussed between the design, between the customer and the supplier, but a very improved concept that had the contribution also from the designers that served as an intermediator, and also they played a very interesting role in promoting, adding value to the discussion. Something that I'm going to show you in the findings of this particular study. And so it's much more interesting when we see this live, and so maybe we'll have some time at the end to play some videos, but let's see. But at least I hope that you understand the process. And now I would like to go into more detail about the findings, you know, because we ran this during a day. It was like half-day workshop with the morning setup. But I mean, at the end, we gathered a lot of information. We did some interviews. We went into more discussion with people individually and in a group setting, and so we were able to match the findings with everything that we have learned from the literature, you know. So we really try to break down this into the building blocks that we know that makes sense theoretically, and then we try to match this with the practical, with everything that we have learned specifically in this case. And so we will start by discussing what we call the quality of the solution. That has to do obviously with the value that has been delivered, with the process of the dialogue between both parties and mediated by the designers, and the approach that was very structured. I was explaining this, it was one of the characteristics of the tool, obviously, and the creative environment that has been delivered to the players, to the team members, in order to discuss and to get a very successful product solution at the end. And so in terms of gamifying the solution, we understand at the end what makes sense for everyone is to perceive value. People need to understand if this kind of approach really provides some kind of payback. And only if you perceive this, you'll be able and you are committed to work and engage with the others throughout the process. And they realized this immediately when they understood that they were like making what I call like these intangible thoughts into more tangible, something that can realize, oh, I know why we are discussing this and what we are going to end up at the end by going through this process and including these inputs in our discussion. And this is something that really motivates people. And all the testimonials, all the codes that we collected really support this view, because people were having like a very clear picture of idea. And basically for people that are just working in these functional areas, they were understanding the main market implications. It was like having like a more macro view and more systemic view about the business, not just about the functional things that they were really specialized on. So, and this is like the fact that the customer, it was really focused on the customer, and the customer was really like creating his own experience around this process. He was so engaged that he wanted to repeat the process, which is possible, that I explained this to you, that we can iterate, and this is basically a very virtual thing for design, is to repeat. But obviously this is like the first signal that he was really committed and interested in going through this process with this short team. And also, this really promoted a very open dialogue, and building this collaborative environment make them feeling like free to express everything that they wanted to say without any kind of constraints or saying like, I cannot express myself like this because the others, they will not be so supportive. But in this case, I mean, like the client was saying all the time, I mean, everyone really handled these opposing views very well, and this, in fact, is something that we also realize by our observation. And also there were some issues about having people with different backgrounds, having like a designer. It was a bit tricky for eventually someone to have, why do I have like a designer having this conversation with us? I mean, it's not really an actor that we typically have in our conversations in these B2B connections. But at the end, they realized that the designer was also adding value to the conversation, making very good questions, and triggering people for other thoughts that really complement what was being discussed by the customer and the supplier. And on top of that, I think it's also important to understand that in order to get this value out of the conversation, we need to have and provide a very structured approach. I will say in a structured and timely manner, because you know that we have time, and so that's we say that this kind of mechanic, the game mechanics that we build on top of the process in order to create this engagement was really into what we call like structured and timely process, because we need to have people to work having the same time for everyone to express themselves, but they cannot commit themselves with the process without having in mind that the others will have also to have more time for them and to express in the same manner and to have the possibility to contribute to the end solution. And so this is something that we created with these rules, with the mechanics, bringing some randomness challenges. That is also by throwing the dice and creating something that people were not really expecting as elements of surprise. And this was something that was very interesting at the end when we had these conversations with people individually. And there are some elements that we consider that are fundamental. For instance, I mean, besides having this clear structure, and this is part of the rules that we created, the other thing is not just something, it's really an important issue when you have people, is that you need to bring something new, you know. The novelty itself is a value added, you know, because we are working with obviously all the time with design tools, typical design tools. I love user journey, I mean, the empathy map. I mean, we all like and love these tools. But sometimes people are a bit sick and tired of having all the time the same tools. So besides having all these advantages of the process of gamifying co-creation, the novelty is also an advantage that we realized from the information that we were gathering and all the comments that we received. And finally, in terms of the structured thing that we are really highlighting, is the fact that in this kind of gamified process, people realized that they were not in a typical brainstorming phase, but instead they were having a more structured and powerful approach. And this was really something that everyone discussed, and they realized at the end, with the clear advantage of having, as is mentioned there, everything was kept. They keep their mind on the main topic all the time, and it was like a big advantage for them to make this alignment and make this a successful approach at the end. And obviously, this is a very creative environment that has been recognized by all parties. And the main advantage was to connect the dots. So it's like, again, it's like in design, we try to synthesize all the information in a structured and timely manner in order to get what we have like blurred market issues into what is the clear path. And everything that we are doing is conducting to the next stage, because we understood, because we have a strategy, because we are all in line, we are in the same page. And so this capability of joining the dots in this kind of atmosphere was really a value added for everyone. Again, as recognized by the startup, and bringing different perspectives also was really possible for them to clarify other issues that eventually in a B2B discussion were not really so they were not emerging by itself. It was really needed to have this kind of discussions with designers, and this is like the findings that I thought it was important to at least to discuss with you today. You will have a lot of detail in the case. I will leave the references at the end, but I will just to conclude with some highlights and just to stress my views about what we find out during this process that can be also important for, particularly for the startups that would like to take this as a takeaway for them to apply in the relationship they are establishing with traditional companies, with potential customers. And I will say that basically a combination of the end-to-end coordination and engagement is basically the most important thing in this process, you know. Coordination is necessary to maintain the focus, always, you know, and you cannot afford just to have like a very fun or playful environment. You need to have both. And to make this combination, you need really to design the process carefully in order to engage people throughout the process with a clearly end goal, like I was showing, like having like this visual report that can be understood by all parties at the end, and promoting this dialogue and understanding about the goals. I mean, just not about setting the goal, but how we are aligned in order to reach that particular goal. And this has been possible by sharing information in a very open, structured and creative environment, like I explained throughout the presentation, but it's something that I think is like a clear advantage from this process. And in summary, I will say that if you want to take this approach for approaching potential clients from traditional companies that you would like to engage in a different manner, I think for sure this can really facilitate collaboration, particularly when you have people with different backgrounds, you know, like a diverse team. And this really can facilitate the discussion. It can also increase the engagement in the process. I was explaining at the beginning when we started to apply this to innovation, because it really offers like this collective and participatory creative experience, and people feel more engaged throughout the time, and also by delivering a clear output, you know. And this is important because sometimes we are doing design and working with in projects, we do not have always our views on the end goal, you know. And in this case, the method promotes the discussion structured about something that we have to deliver at the end. And this is going to be very important for increasing what we call the probability of success for entering the next stage. That is typically we take this minimal viable concept and we try to prototype to get feedback in order to improve it, to repeat, and to go over and go over and over again until we get something that we can trust and that we feel that have the possibility of being successful in the marketplace. And so that's basically what I was having in mind to discuss with you. And as promised, I leave here the reference for the paper, which is, I mean, this case was written in a scientific paper, and so I tried just to take some thoughts and highlighting some issues that I thought it was more important for you for this session. But now I will leave the time for the Q&A, and thank you so much again for your attention and for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rui. That was a great session. We have some questions in the chat box, and let me just read it out to you.
Yes,
so the first question from Mr. Bhavnish is, how can one analyze the need for gamification?
I mean, if I understood the question, the need for having like a gamification approach in this co-creation, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. I mean, in our case, we realized that because we wanted to have an approach that could overcome some of the issues that we found that were like were creating difficulties for people to co-create. And so it was basically the lack of structure, you know, and the engagement and the lack of engagement throughout the process. So gamification makes more sense to apply when we are co-creating something for the client, because we have a very good approach for engaging people in a more structured and timely manner. And that's basically the reasons why we choose and we applied gamification. I don't know if it's answering your question.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Welcome.
The next question is from Mr. Mukul. On the operational side of the study, what was the motivation for the B2B participants to join the gamification session?
Well, it's simply, I mean, besides having people attending this project and the sessions that were really very smart, very bright, at the end, the major motivation was to gain business. You know, all of them were interested in having potential partners for developing their own business. You know, the suppliers, typically this cluster traditional manufacturers, they were looking for fresh ideas from the creative industries. And the creative industries, all these startups, were really eager to get the opportunity to do business with traditional clusters. So this is, I think, it's like what really connects people in this case, in this particular project. Besides, obviously, they are all very interested and curious about this process. But business, I think it was the main driver.
Yes, that's true. There is a observation or a question from Mr. Raghavan. He says this is a collaborative approach to finding a solution, and he's requesting you to expand on the gamification aspect in this approach.
Yes, I think, I don't know if we have time, if I can show a video.
Yes, I think we would have around 10
Okay.
minutes left if that fits in.
So
Yeah.
maybe, because I think it's self-explaining better than, let's see if I can share with you this. I don't know if you are seeing my screen now. Yes?
Yes, it's visible. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, this is like a case, because as I was explaining you, I mean, I do not have like a marketing team. We do not have the resources to promote and to publish everything that we are doing, because we rely on ourselves and our partners. And in this case, it was one of our clients that produced the video that at least explain a bit how people are working in this gamified environment. And this is one of the projects that we did for Novartis. And in this case, you will see how people are working. You know, they are discussing the development of an idea, of a concept, in a gamified process that has been delivered by this board game, you know, Idea Chef. And so they are in a process of developing the concept by asking questions and giving answers, and in building on top of these contributions more value to the process. And so they are trying to design this in a very gamified method. And the end goal is to make a very clear pitch at the end for the board of directors. So imagining that you have like a challenge, and you have a challenge owner. So they submit the challenge. So it was like in this process of B2B. And then you have a meeting with your team in order to develop the process in a very gamified manner, you know. And so it was like the way that we designed in order to promote this close collaboration between people with different backgrounds, and they are playing, but at the same time they are running the process. So they are not immersed in a game, they are in fact working in order to get the final concept at the end. And so this is like an example, and people, this is like the visual report that I was explaining and that they also did at the case. And so they can visually explain their final concept in a storytelling manner, you know, that's like a canvas where they connect different dots. So at the end, they can tell a very clear story about what the concept is and explaining this to the challenge owner, to the client, and then they can make a very clear assessment about the different perspectives. And this is like so a very engaging process for most of the participants. And it's like a boot camp, but I don't know if I can also pass this. Are you seeing the video now?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, this is like just to show you how we can run this in classes. And so we have all these materials that we share with the team members, and we provide the whole package. And the game was designed for a team of 4 up to 6 people, so with different backgrounds, and they are all committed to get some kind of concept at the end. And so there are different steps they take throughout the time, and in a very structured and timely manner. There are very simple rules they can apply, and this is promoting discussion about the issues, and in a very collaborative manner, because they all have the same time to reply and to contribute. And they have like also a peer assessment system that will enrich the idea, building on the contributions of the others. We can enrich the idea and end up with this more robust concepts, when we call it like more, making these more tangible in a way that are more clear, more straightforward in terms of the value that we would like to deliver. And everything is running in a game-like process, you know, but they are not really immersed in the game just for playing or for fun. They are working, in fact, you know. And this is quite interesting, because when we have corporates working in this kind of gamified experience, people think that, okay, I'm not going to work. This is like a game session. So they feel that are very much relaxed because they really enjoy the process. And this is like the novelty. This is like the intrinsic motivation they take for playing, but at the end they feel a bit tired because they worked a lot, you know. And this is a very hard working process. I mean, it's like very tough in terms of cognitive, because you need really to connect these dots and to reach the final result in the time that has been allocated for the session. So I mean, it's something that, well, I'm not going to more detail, but I hope that at least you have a better idea about what gamification is. And now this team of in Milan, this team co-created the outlaw furniture for the flooring manufacturer. Right.
Great. I think I hope that clarifies. And also, Mr. Pratik Singh had asked to share examples from the toolkit. I think you have shown us, but just in case there's anything more examples from the toolkit.
I think it was like, I mean, I think it was appropriate, at least for this stage. Maybe we can arrange another session to go deeper in terms of the mechanics. But I think in a nutshell, I think it clarifies at least.
Sure. And any more questions? We invite more questions from the audience. You could either unmute yourself and say your questions, or if you have any observations that you would like to share. So just a question, Dr. Rui, what according to you is the future of gamification?
Well, I left a message in a recent paper that we published. I think, like I was saying about coordination and engagement, I think design thinking and gamification goes hand in hand. I think the future of gamification is design. You know, this is a design method. And so I strongly believe that in the near future, most of the design approaches will incorporate gamification. And this is the message that I'm leaving for this audience that I believe is from the innovation space. And so I strongly believe that they should understand this and welcome this kind of approach.
Right. And are there any challenges that you see, when a company is, an organization is, say, doing it for the first time? Are there any things that they need to keep in mind?
Well, absolutely. And this is a great question. And in fact, there are a lot of limitations and constraints when we are approaching corporates, basically, you know, because, I mean, this is also a game changer, you know, because we need to interact with people from the other side that are, I mean, discussing this opportunity with us, that are really open-minded. People that understand that by playing a game, or I mean, you are still working. You are not really leaving space for your employees to have fun, for just having fun, but in fact, we are providing them a stage for being more creative, for being more collaborative, you know, but this must be understood by the leadership.
Absolutely.
And so this is something that we have learned throughout the time when discussing these opportunities with corporates, because it was not just a matter of size or type of companies, you know, it just more about the leadership itself, you know, how people are really embracing these kind of approaches, because is a game changer, is really making people realize what is the organizational culture, how this must be changed in order to welcome other views from people, you know. This is a very interesting topic also for employee engagement, you know, working with millennials and people that are really more open to this kind of approaches. Sorry for the expression, but they are sick and tired of having the same type of connections with others mediated by the same tools and approaches that don't leave them space to express themselves freely, you know. And finally, there are also a line of a research line that I'm exploring, that is the way that we are developing our work, typically in companies, moving from what is the top down, from a bottom up approach, you know. So what I strongly believe is that this kind of gamification approach for innovation brings more power to people, you know. It's really empowering people in a way that you don't need so much to have a project leader, yeah. So it's putting in risk the middle management. No? Organizations need to understand how to reinvent themselves for the next decade, you know, because they need to understand that people are requiring other approaches, you know.
So this, in a way, can also be used for, internal processes, the employee experience enhancement.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, imagining like, because it really facilitates having everyone at the same page, you know, and speaking the same language, because we can create like a neutral environment where people can express freely, but they are not having any type of constraints by not understanding exactly what is the technicality that is needed to be successful in the conversation. So I mean, it's very interesting also to go deep and examine this type of conversations between people and understand these dynamics.
And I think it goes to say that it accelerates the business outcomes. You can correlate to the final business returns.
Well, this is also why we believe that having like a very clear output at the end really facilitates, because you always need to iterate, you need to repeat the process, and people think that sometimes they are doing like a workshop and it has been very successful. Everyone was very excited, but at the end they are not proceeding at the same level of success as expected because they don't want to repeat, because they are not seeing the end result. So they are not really motivated to return and to repeat.
True. Great. I'll just check with the audience once again if there are any more questions. And it's perfectly timed. I think we've reached the end of the session. Thank you so much, Dr. Rui. Okay, there is one question come up. Let me just take that also. When is a product or experience ready to be gamified?
Well, it's another good question. And I will say that we really need to conduct everything in a very structured manner by framing. I pick up the example of design thinking, framing exactly the problems. So before starting applying the game mechanics, we need to have a clear understanding of the problem, of the issue that we would like to address. So I think this must be clarified all the time. And because when people start to delivering ideas and contributions for creating like a concept that will address the problem, they all have to have in mind what the problem is. So again, this is something that's why I'm saying that gamification goes hand in hand with design thinking, in the sense that we need to introduce all these steps to make it successful and to have a very good gamify experience. And the other thing is about what I also mentioned about the theories of psychology and motivation that are really important. It's not just about having a clear goal and understanding the problem, and having people that are really intrinsic motivated to participate. And this is like something that is really fundamental.
And I think, again, it's agnostic across industries, right? It can just work in traditional businesses, new age businesses, any kind of industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have an interesting question from Mukul. He asks, how can we order this toolkit for classroom use?
Okay. Yeah. So basically, yes, we have this possibility of training the trainer. So what we are doing is basically training some trainers at the university that then they can teach and use the game in every class they want with the students. So we can discuss this at the end.
Yeah, so it will be great if you can share us, any material or anything that you want to share, and we could,
of course,
send it across to all the participants.
Perfect. Perfect.
I'll just wait for a minute or two because I know there are a lot of questions. This is really interesting, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions. So we'll just wait for a minute or two for more questions.
Yes, but I think that the training and the education of people is really a good start, because before going to the process itself, applying this to a process of creating like we did here, creating a new furniture line for the flooring manufacturer, maybe you can start by educating your employees and creating the culture, to successfully apply the gamification principle. So it's quite interesting when you start to engage with your peers in a training session mediated by gamification approaches. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think absolutely that's the first step, you know, and I think that's a big necessity that we see across a lot of organizations. Yes, I think that's it. There are no more questions. So I want to formally thank you, Dr. Rui. I think that was an extremely valuable session today afternoon, a Wednesday afternoon, well spent. And I'm sure the audience is going to interact with you in the future also, and we'll share whatever information that can be shared with the audience and all the attendees. I thank all the attendees for taking out time to attend this session. Please watch out for our next webinar on March 10th, and you will receive the details soon. We will also be sending a mailer where we would request your feedback, because your feedback is extremely important to ensure that you have the best content coming across from leading global experts. I have also shared the link of the awards in the chat box. Please do register, please do apply for these awards, and they can really maximize your success and impact. Once again, Dr. Rui, thank you so much and have a great evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Have
you.
a good time. Thank you.